check. Oh yeah. Oh wow. It's.
Maybe many of our members may think English is too difficult, so they're a little shy.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Oh, wow, this is very loud. Check, 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 check. Is this taking it down? Not really. Okay.
I think this one maybe is just for this one.
Okay. So this one can be off, so we don't have feedback. Cool. There's. Oh, is it that one? Check, 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 check. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Nice. Okay. Check, check. All right. Yeah, we'll be fine. All right. I'll wait another minute or two for people to walk in, and then. All right. Yeah, because I do think there's a bit of break time between my slot and the next slot, right? So we should be fine. And I don't have another talk until like 2, so, you know, I'm not in a rush now.
I'll give a very brief introduction in Chinese to tell everyone who you are and what you do, and then you can start your presentation. 大家好，我们接下来就马上要开始我们第2场的议程。对，那这场议程是由 Simon 带来，这个 Story Model for Growth Project。其实对很多的开源软体，但可能没有多少的奉献者有机会去了解这些 project 里面哪些部分是有这样的没有做一个全面的一个分析。那Simon 他在读书的时候就开始投入了像说 Ops 这样的一个系统，那时候可能这个名词都还没有出现。对，那所以在他学完他就将这样的一个这样的一些所学的一些概念，然后在很多的 open source project 做修改或做建议，协助 open source 让free software 去提升它的资讯安全，然后全体面的一个分析。对，所以这个议题对我们 open source 的 security 来讲是非常重要的。好，那我们接下来就马上欢迎Simon 来给我们现场演讲。那请大家掌声欢迎他的演讲。
谢谢。哦，大家好，我叫 Simon。And that and ordering black coffee at 7-Eleven is about as much Mandarin as I speak at this point. So bear with me as we get through the rest of the talk in English. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the great introduction. I think I caught a few keywords in there. So you may or may not already know. I volunteer for the Free Software Foundation Europe. We have a booth here at COSCUP, so if at any time today or tomorrow you want to find me to catch up on any things open source and cybersecurity, find me in room 309. So it's actually just, we're in 3rd floor now, right? 3rd floor now. So it's like down the hall, just short of the hacking corner. Take a left into the room. I have also, some time ago now, started my own company. So I work as a cybersecurity consultant or general IT consultant, but a lot of my projects are in cybersecurity. That means I help organizations solve hard problems. I like to look at hard problems, and there's a lot of hard problems that we have to solve in cybersecurity. So that's really nice. Another thing that is really nice is when you have your own company, you can go on stage and say, opinions are my own, but also those of my employer, so I can say whatever the hell I want and not get fired. Yay, that's nice. What are some of these hard cybersecurity problems that we need to solve? One of the things that I want to talk about today is the question of what can go wrong in our software. Are we doing a good job of protecting our users? And an like all-time high is how much security is actually enough, right? In a world where we had infinite resources and infinite time, it would be nice to go to every single project and tell every single project, you need to be super secure, you need to do this, 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 right? But we live in the real world. I'm not that familiar with Taiwan's ecosystem yet. In Europe, cybersecurity people are a little hard to find. There's not that many of us. Software developers are a little hard to find, right? There's not that many of them either. So their time is really valuable. So we need to be very conscious of how we spend our time and focusing on the right problems and the right questions to solve. Oh, and I'm messing up my mind so much that I did my opinions are my own joke way too early in the talk. So yeah, I'm still my own employer, so that's really nice. All right, but to talk about threat modeling, why did I choose this topic? Why am I choosing this little tool, right? And that's really what I want to do in this talk, is give you some tools that you can use to start answering some of these questions for your projects. They are supposed to be simple questions that everybody can start asking themselves, and my hope is that it will be enough to get you started in thinking about cybersecurity in your project, no matter if you are a small one-person hobby thing or if you run a big project with lots of developers and thousands of users, right? The starting point can be the same for everyone. There is a trend lately that a lot of cybersecurity people will tell you the first thing you always do is threat modeling, right? It's like no matter what you do, just start with threat modeling because it's so great. And it is a useful tool. I do think it's a useful tool. But I also am always skeptical once something reaches this level of almost seemingly silver bullet, right? So I do think there is a discussion that we could have as a community at what times and at what points it is useful to use a certain tool and at what times it is not useful to use a certain tool. Unfortunately, I only have 30 minutes today, so I do want to get to the point where I can actually tell you how to start threat modeling and spend the rest of my time teaching you how to use this tool and not have a big philosophical discussion about whether it's the right tool to use or not. But it is something, since it's getting so popular right now, that I do want to disclaim of like, you know, sometimes it's worth it to take a step back and also think about, again, how are you spending your time? How are you spending your resources? And is the problem that you are looking at actually a nail, and is the hammer the right tool for it, or are you looking at something else and maybe need another tool? That said, I do obviously think threat modeling is a very useful tool that can be helpful a lot of the times to exactly understand what can go wrong in your project. So it's a nice way of taking that mindset of if somebody tried to do bad things with my software, what could happen? Get a understanding of the context, what users are using your project, what is your target audience, and what could happen to them if your software is not living up to its security promises. What are the stakes? And lastly, what is really useful, in my opinion, as an outcome of threat modeling is you can communicate those stakes and those contexts both to your developers and your users, right? So you can make it clear, document for your project, hey, this is what we are trying to do. This is what is at stake for our users. And that is why we need to, do a really good job of security, or, do a reasonable job, but, we're not saving lives here. We're talking about a, code scanning app for like points at a conference, right? It shouldn't be, like super bad, but, and I will get to some examples, so I hope the distinction will become more clear later. But before we look at concrete examples, I want to take the step back and draw from the guy who wrote the book on threat modeling. His name is Adam Shostak. He, if not came up with the concept, he at least popularized it a lot. So he has great material on YouTube on the topic of threat modeling, of like also some hour tutorials, right? If you want to get more into it. But I really like the model he follows, where he says to get starting in threat modeling, you really only need to ask yourself four questions. Question number 1, what are we working on? What is the thing that we are building? Question number 2, what could go wrong? In cybersecurity, we always assume a bad actor, right? So it takes a bit of a change of mindset to like very specifically put yourself into the state of mind to think, if I was actively trying to do bad things with this, what could happen? What could go wrong? And then of course, ideally, we don't just want to identify a problem and admire it, we want to hopefully solve it. So question number 3, what can we do about it? And finally, question number 4, did we do a good job, right? Are we done with our threat model? Did we think of everything? Are there other people, other experts that we could talk to that can bring in more diverse viewpoints, new ideas, right? Or, again, based on question number 1, what are we working on? Are we already feeling comfortable with the level of modeling that we did and already feel like, okay, we have a reasonable understanding of what is at stake and what we need to do to live up to the promise we make to our users. And it's really important to ask the question if we did a good job, so I have the slide in there twice for some reason. All right, the remainder of the time, I want to walk you through 2 examples to make it clear of like, how do the different levels of stake, like what are we building, how does it matter, how does it influence, on the one hand. And I also want to give you the basic vocabulary of threat modeling. If you ever happen to be involved in that activity, you already know what people talk about when they talk about certain words and certain concepts, right? The 2 examples that I want to look at is, one will be a security-focused messenger, right? Something like Signal or Simplex, right? I used to mention Telegram, and then I realized the threat model for Telegram is very different from that of Signal, where the guy who wrote Telegram publicly goes on record to say secure communication is only one of the things he's trying to do, and he's trying to do many other things. Unfortunately, I didn't have the time yet to dig deep, and I would love to contrast like Signal and Telegram, because so many people in the cybersecurity community use Telegram, but I didn't have the time yet. So I'm sticking very specifically with Signal right now, and only this like small disclaimer, Telegram might try to solve different things and is not exactly the same thing. All right, but we will have the security-focused messenger and an online event management platform as the other example to have like something more lightweight, right? Right. And now we're just going to run through our 4 questions. Number 1, what are we working on if we talk about the security-focused messenger, right? Remember, what are we working on is trying to document and put down the security promises in the context of our users and our software, right? And if you try to put this, and again, disclaimer, I am not a Signal developer, so I don't know if this is what they did to come up with their idea for security. It is just what, if I were the guy who was asked to do threat modeling for Signal, this is where I would start, right? And one of the things I think becomes really clear when you look at it, of what Signal is trying to do is create a communications app that facilitates secure communication in hostile environments. If you let that sink for a moment, that means the potential security stakes for an app like this are really high, right? So we're talking about politically exposed people, like political dissidents or investigative journalists. So people who are doing things that people who are in power in a certain geographical area don't necessarily like. And these people should be able to use this app to communicate without fear of their life, right? That is what we're talking about. And if you look at events around the world, global geopolitical events like the Arab Spring or like the Hong Kong protests, free and open source software in communication apps of that kind were very heavily used at that time to exactly facilitate organization, communication, and coordination of activities that they're doing, right? If you look at information about, it's dated a bit, right? But if you look at what Snowden did and the things he used and how he operated, the guy who did the big leaks of like what the US government is doing to snoop on US citizens, right? He used a lot of security-focused free software projects, right? So again, politically exposed people in hostile environments. So we're talking about, people use our app, or their app, believing that if they use it, they will not go to jail for doing things that is basically what we assume human rights, right? So, not a small thing. Now, on the other hand of the spectrum, if we look at something like the online event management platform, right? Something like Pre-Talks doesn't fit the bill exactly that COSCUP is using because they don't use it to sell the tickets. A lot of these platforms have like calls for participation and attendees and ticket sales all in one, right? So if you have that, something like that in mind, we are talking about a platform for event organizers to manage events, sell tickets, and communicate to attendees efficiently. So, right off the bat, just by making stuff like that clear, I hope it's obvious how it makes a difference if we're talking about something like Signal or if we're talking about something like the online event management platform, right? So the stakes are vastly different. Doesn't mean something like the event management platform doesn't need to do anything about security, right? We are talking about event organizers that want to sell tickets securely. They are running events that might be really useful and really convenient and good for the community or for their business. They want to recuperate their costs by selling tickets. That makes sense. We are also talking about stuff like private data of the attendees, right? I as an attendee, if I sign up for a conference, and maybe even give you payment data to buy for a ticket, I want to have some hope that my data is not going to end up in some data breach 2 weeks from today, right? So it's not, by no means does this mean we can get away to not give a iota about anything security in the online event management platform. But at the same time, we're not talking about people potentially going to jail and being tortured, right? So, and having those things written down, made clear, and communicated to your development team can already go a long way for everybody to know what are we talking about and why do we care about security the way we care about security. What could go wrong? This is the second major part that I'm going to spend on, the second question, and this is where I want to introduce some vocabulary. Right? On a very high level, very basically, if we talk about a potential threat scenario, so we try to sit down and think what could be a situation where something goes wrong with our app, right? In the case of the secure communications app, we could think of something like this. An oppressive regime monitors all internet communication to identify political dissidents based on messages they exchange. On a very, very high level, this is what we call a threat scenario that follows a certain structure that you will see whenever you come up with threat scenarios, right? So usually, again, in cybersecurity, we take this adversarial view. So we have a person actively trying to do something bad, which we usually call the threat actor. So in this case, we have this very generic, again, very high level, oppressive regime that is trying to do something. What are they trying to do? Usually, they're trying to use a certain vulnerability to do something bad, right? Again, in this example, we're super high level. If you know how the internet works, if you know how network works, you know that somebody who is in charge of a large chunk of the network infrastructure, big telecom providers or government organizations that control the laws that govern the telecom operators, it's not that hard for them to just look at all the traffic that is going around and understand a lot of the things that are being sent back and forth on the internet, right? So on the very high level, we have something that is just a design flaw vulnerability of a network and how social infrastructure or our public infrastructure is being run. Right? Again, if you keep doing this, if you get more technical, a vulnerability could be more concrete towards your app. But one thing that I think is also important to keep in mind for the purpose of threat modeling, you're not doing a vulnerability assessment at a point in time, right? The threat model, at least how I use the tool, is more, as I've talked about, communicating the stakes and understanding on a higher level what generally can go wrong and what you can do about it. So it's much more about certain design decisions that you take, architectural decisions that you take, and not, we have in this line of code this SQL injection and we need to fix it, right? That is the scope of a vulnerability assessment, and that is something similar but not the same as threat modeling. And again, talking a little bit about vocabulary, at this level, we're also not talking about a risk assessment, because we're not talking about how likely is someone to do this, right? At this point, again, we're trying to guide our design decisions. So we are always assuming eventually someone might try this, and then what is our software doing to defend against it, right? So, but still, on a high level, we have the threat actor, and they are abusing some kind of weakness or vulnerability to cause a certain impact, right? So these are the three building blocks. It's always threat actor abuses ability to cause impact. If you follow this model, you should have a fairly easy time to come up with things that could go wrong for your software. It's a bit of a point of preference if you stop of the point of view of your app, or if you stop at like what happens to your users, right? We could have phrased this threat scenario to say, identify political dissidents, and as a consequence, the user has to fear for their life, right? There is no really right or wrong way. It's just the point being, don't get too hung up on the particular phrases or how this is worded or stuff like that, right? It's much more about thinking about these kinds of things to, again, communicate and guide your design decisions. Now, Messenger, right? Big bad thing. What could go wrong when we think about the online event management platform? And here, in this situation, we could come up with something like this, right? A malicious user abuses a vulnerability, again, super high level, in our software to generate free tickets for a paid event, right? This is about one of the worst things that you could think of when you talk of a platform that is designed to help somebody recuperate costs for running events. But it could also be something like this. A malicious attendee abuses a vulnerability in our software to access private information about the other attendees, right? So again, taking the first steps, and then the idea is as you iterate, you can drill more and more down what exactly is the nature of the thing that you're building, what are the stakes, what could go wrong for your users, what are the promises that you're doing, and what can we do about it, right? And now this is where we really start to talk about what are the countermeasures, what are the things that we're going to do in our software to make sure the chances of those threat scenarios implementing are really low. Again, right, I only have about 10 minutes left, so on a very high level, Signal will implement secure and authenticated end-to-end encryption between all users to protect them. Okay, that is the most basic, it sounds super simple when I say the most basic thing, but that is one of their core promises, right? The core things that they're doing. But it also highlights, it could also highlight other stuff, right? Like, our messenger will be easy to use for the general public, so adoption is widespread and usage is not in itself suspicious. And that is something that we often forget about when we talk about security-focused things that are supposed to be used in stuff like privacy or like civil disobedience and stuff like that, right? Imagine if only people who had their life depend on something like Signal use Signal, right? That means to find someone who might be suspicious to you as the oppressive regime, you just have to look at everybody using Signal, right? So if you ever ask yourself, why are they introducing another sticker pack and GIF reactions into this secure messenger? Why are they not doing security things or more security things, right? That is exactly why, right? You need to be, in this game, approachable and appeal to the general populace, so that ideally everybody is using secure communications app and not only people who have their safety depend on secure communications. How about the online event management platform, right? And again, only giving examples at this point, you need to do much more for something like Signal and also for the event management platform to actually then end up in the end goal. But I hope I can give you enough of a starting point to get the ball rolling. When we talk about the online event management platform, again, high level, right? We will follow secure design best practices. So try to use modern libraries, try to follow good coding practices, and our platform will undergo regular vulnerability assessments, right? So again, we have to be conscious right now at this stage. We're not talking about finding and fixing vulnerabilities. We're talking about big design decisions. And then finally, did we do a good job? Well, for my examples right here, it's really easy. This has been high-level examples. Of course, at this point, none of this is a good enough job for either of those two examples to call it a day. But really, what you do now is you go back, right? You go back to the first question. You now know you have your initial stakes. You go to, what are we building? Did we think of everything? Did we identify either the most critical uses, so the highest stakes, or is there something else we can think of that we didn't think of now? Are there other things that could go wrong? Are there other things we need to or can do about it? And eventually, you will end up with something where you can say, okay, this is our threat model. This is how we will guide our security activities in this project to make sure we live up to the level of security we want to live up. And then you're just about done. So finally, the last thing I want to point out is there are a few free software tools that can help you do this. Personally, to get started, I'm a big fan of the good old pen and paper or whiteboard, right? So the only thing you really need to get started is get a bunch of smart people like you certainly are, because all of you are here at COSCUP talking about open source, so you're already pretty bright, apparently. Take a whiteboard, start sketching out your software, and start having the conversation. Which is why the first two things on this list are like online collaborative whiteboards, right? So if you are in a distributed team, an online open source community, something like it, I don't even know anymore if they're diagrams.net or Draw.io now, so I just have it like this, right? I still call it Draw.io. It's an online whiteboard diagram drawing platform, or Excalidraw. Again, they have hosted versions. All your data is stored in local storage in your browser. Both of those are open source projects that you can host yourself if you're like a bigger organization or corporation. Really useful tools to get started. The rest are more specific threat modeling tools. One of them is pretty cool, is PyTM. That is a Python domain-specific language and tooling to put your threat model into code. And that is great because coders love code, right? So anything that can put stuff you want to communicate to developers into plain text and check it into a Git repository is great. I wouldn't immediately jump to something like PyTM. I would always recommend to do the whiteboard first to get started and think about the whole things. But once you have an understanding and an idea of what your threat model is and how you want to drill down and are more drilling down, this project could be something that can be interesting for you to have it live more closer to where your software lives and where your developers work. And then the last two things are UI tools that are specifically designed to help you create a threat model, right? OWASP, I want to mention already because it's a great project. If you never heard of the Open Web Application Security Project, you should totally check them out. They do have a threat modeling cookbook, I think they call it as well, right? Where you will find more information in the style of what I said today. And they also have something called Threat Dragon, which can help you visualize both your software architecture and your threat models. I'm hesitating a little bit at this point because for me personally, I'm not a big fan of tools specifically for threat modeling because especially as techies, we have to have a tendency to get lost in the tool and talk more about the tool and how the tool does it than the thing that we're trying to do. But they can be, again, helpful and useful to get you started and to guide you through the process. So if you are a person that likes to have visual aids and likes to have clickable things to help you go through the process, it might be something that works for you. And finally, Threagile, again, they are a UI tool that are built more with an agile approach in mind. It can be something that can be helpful to you. All of those are free software, open source tools. All of those you can run yourself and take a look at and just find online. And with that, I'm done with what I wanted to talk about today. I think we do have a little bit of time for questions at this point. Otherwise, you can always also find me at the FSFE booth down the hall and, you know, snap my contact information. Signal as the best. You may be able to tell from the way how it's almost twice the size of everything else, but I also am available on other channels if Signal is not for you. Thank you, everybody.
Which one do you think is most insecure?
I think that's not that wouldn't be a fair question because you are comparing apples to suspension bridges a little bit, right? Because Signal and Line are mostly messengers. I mean, Line is also everything, right? And then LinkedIn and Instagram are very clearly social media. Do I think Signal is more secure than Line overall? Obviously. But, you know, I think all of them are somewhat okay to use with my personal threat model in mind.
Yeah, that's right. It's also a great one. Signal may be the best one among all. Yeah.
The nice thing, so the hot new shit is Simplex, simplex.chat. The thing is I haven't found, one person showed it to me at the FOSS Asia Summit. And that is the only other person I know that runs Simplex. So I don't have anybody to talk to on Simplex. A lot of people already use Signal, so you know it has this network effect. So that's really nice.
Simplex.chat.
Simplex.chat. Yes. We have a whiteboard, right? .chat. Yes. We have a. So they're like next level. They don't even have usernames, right? And it's all peer-to-peer. I have, my entire knowledge about Simplex is based on their marketing materials. So you know, don't think I've looked at any actual. I didn't look into their claims, right? But you know, it's kind of, they seem kind of cool. So, and I'm plugging Signal a lot, so it's good to have some competition out there. Any other questions?
Okay, I think there may be
Cool. That's good.
I would like to discuss with you in private.
Absolutely. If you want to discuss in private, hit me up on Signal. If you want to discuss in semi-private, anything else is also good, right?
Also, you will have your booth.
Yes.
Yeah,
309, just down the hall to the left. Thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure to be here, and I hope to talk to a lot of you soon. Bye.